To a place where not only does this not mean anything, nihilism, but if I need to somehow exist and thrive in this world, I have to make it mean something for me, existentialism. And how can I possibly make it mean something for me if it doesn't mean anything? Absurdism, and yet, what else is there but to try? So that's basically the foundation of this all, and it's something with which I have struggled and grappled with. Perhaps it's the essence of my life struggle, trying to figure out just who the hell am I, and what in the world is this weird place that I'm in. Didn't ask to be here, it just happened. As the philosopher Martin Heidegger says, I'm thrown into existence. And most of the time I feel this sense of weird dysphoria, disorientation, and detachment, like I don't even know what I am. And I'm supposed to try and figure out what all this around me is. And it's maddening, it's frustrating, and it brought me to a place where I thought the only way out was not being. I was convinced, because I'm so alone in my head. And it's a gap that the more people try and bridge, the more I realize is unbridgeable. No one can know my thoughts, my feelings, my worldview, my reasons and motivations. We can guess, we can try to understand, but it seems the more we try to understand, the farther we fall short in understanding the mind and heart of another. So I felt, and continue to feel, I might add, but it's better now, incredibly alienated, isolated. This interpreting thing that is me, but isn't all of my experience and all of my body and mind. This thing that notices and tries to make sense of it all, which in itself is a picture painted by the rest of my brain, is always, as far as I can tell, going to be kind of confused and disoriented. And due to a combination of that and external life circumstances, that was too much. I said, screw this, I'm done, I've had enough, goodbye world. And I think I even sent a few ironic Facebook messages to some close friends as I was making the attempt. Something about, I'm finally free now, hooray! In any case, there was one particular night where this all came to head. Sometime last December, ironically enough, after a post-mo Christmas party at the Madison, I sang karaoke, Unwell by Matchbox 20, which is perfectly, beautifully ironic given the situation. Got more than pleasantly inebriated, took some pills in a very systematic manner, because even in my intoxication, I knew you have to spread it out evenly if it's going to work. And my perfectly methodical impulses took over. And I was going to leave. I was so tired with this struggle that Friedrich Nietzsche called facing the abyss. And the abyss, by the way, is not life sucks. The abyss is I am just a picture my mind paints, and it's always changing and I can't even know it completely, but the only way to live and thrive is to know it as best I can somehow. That's the abyss. And I was tired of it. And I was done. But in the process of leaving, that part of myself that wasn't myself took over and reached out to some friends who I hadn't talked to in years. And one of them, at the time I hated her, but now I'm incredibly grateful, she played along. She said, okay, you know, I understand wanting to die. I understand this is too much. I've been there. I get it. You know, is there anything you want me to tell people after you're gone? Is there anything you want me to do about your body? You know, people are going to come find you. And I was so far gone, I didn't care. But in a sense, it was one of my profoundest moments of clarity, realizing finally facing up and owning to the fact that, yes, I am fundamentally detached. In any event, she tricked me and she called the police, and in my semi-drunken, intoxicated state with pills that were in the process of destroying my liver, along with the alcohol that is in the longer, more protracted process of destroying my liver, the police came, and I was, due to the adrenaline and that perpetual analyzing part of my brain, incredibly aware of what was about to happen to me. I was going to be locked up. I was going to be put in a psych ward where I would have to BS some reasons for wanting to live in order for them to let me out. I was going to be, and I'd been in this situation before, I knew the score. I was going to be deprived of any sort of freedom, any sort of contact with anything in the outside world. And there was nothing I could do about it. And it's incredibly ironic that I cared, given that I had just wanted to die. But at that moment in my life, the only thing that mattered was, I want to be dead. There's nothing else. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of not even being the agent responsible for my own choices. I'm gone. And then finding out that my will to do that wasn't even strong enough. So the only thing I could do was get angry. And I got phenomenally angry. I sent a message to this friend that had a lot of words I will not repeat here, but one of them rhymed with brother trucker. And the policeman said, okay, you are going to come with us. And I knew that in the end I was going to be overpowered. But I said, no, I refuse, I do not want this. And they said, okay, well, you're walking or we're carrying you, you choose. And at that moment, I had, though my choices were limited, absolute freedom. And I did what, in retrospect, was one of the most life-affirming things I've ever done. I said, no, I can't control the external circumstances. I don't want to be here. I am compelled to be here against my will. But the one thing that matters to me right now is I'm not doing this willingly. You are going to carry me. And since I've recovered from that, the twin ordeal of wanting to end my own life and having to deal with the mental health establishment that really didn't understand my reasons the more they tried to understand my reasons, because how could this be something you come at after thinking about it? There's no possible way it can make rational sense, right? So to them it was some emotional thing, where to me it was the product of immense thought, where some of my premises were flawed. But it was the result of an analytical process, which the system was not very well equipped to deal with. In any case, that was the birth of what I call my existentialism, which means you are limited by your external factors, the things in your life you cannot change, that in a sense bring about who you are in this very moment. I would love to be able to look out and see all you guys. You're probably nodding off. I can't. I would love to be able to, well actually no, because Jen's great and I like spending time with her and she drove me here. But I would love to be able to get a car and drive places so I don't have to depend on people so darn much. I can't. Philosophers call that facticity. But for me, being bound by that facticity, I have found a phenomenal freedom Sartre, an existential philosopher, put it as being condemned to be free. And we don't always like it because it means we have to take responsibility for our choices. And we can't always blame them on, well, I was tired today, or I felt kind of lazy, or, yeah, that may have been so. But you still chose to respond to it in a certain way. And existentialism emphasizes that choice more than it emphasizes the external factors. And actually, I've come to a place where I realize that as far as the person I'm building and becoming and making myself, changing from moment to moment all the time, maybe some consistent themes, it's very tenuous. And in a sense, it's only part of who I am. There are all these biological drives and things that aren't entirely under my control. But the more I recognize the power of my consciousness to make choices as I think best, it's a phenomenal freedom and a terrifying responsibility. So, how much time do I have left?
10.
Okay, 10. I will spend the rest of the time, the rest of these 10, I was going to talk about science and rationality and how that all fits in with this, which is a fascinating discussion, but that's not as important to me as sort of the subjective moment-to-moment meaning that I try and create for myself. So I'll spend time on that. If you want to talk to me about how this intersects with the scientific method and knowing reality outside myself, all that sort of fascinating stuff, we can talk later. So I will say there are, right now as I think about it, 3, I guess, tentative evolving pillars that I'm trying to build my life around and make matter, even though I know it does not matter objectively outside of myself. And ironically enough, they're kind of typified by 3 songs. 2 of them I just happened to hear in the shower this morning as I was getting ready for this thing. Songs which I kind of hate, but they fit. One of them, I was, washing my hair with what I hope was shampoo. It may have been body wash, I didn't check. I was washing my hair and this Miley Cyrus song came on, The Climb. And Miley freaking Cyrus, why am I listening to the radio for one thing? How come I'm not using some sort of, Spotify mix of things I actually like? But I started listening to the words because that's what I do. I'm a word person. Some people like to think and bring rationality back to numbers, and it can be brought there. But to me, words are more how I interact with the world. And anyways, the song kind of hit on my subjective morality better than I possibly could. It said things like, there's always going to be what the hell did it say? There's always going to be another mountain. I'm always going to want to make it move. There's always going to be an uphill battle, and sometimes I'm going to have to lose. But more specifically to the way my ethics are going is, it's not about how fast you get there. It's not about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb. In other words, in philosophical terms, I'm more of a deontologist. There are right and wrong choices to make, as opposed to a consequentialist. There are right and wrong results you should account for. And I have to decide what those are. And it's really unnerving because I'm going to get that wrong a lot. Friedrich Nietzsche put it as, I'm human, all too human. And so we're left with, in this sense, a superhuman responsibility of, I have to make my own morals. I can follow societies, if I want to, or if I see a reason to. And I can, knowing full well there might be social consequences, break with society's morals, as that seems fitting for me, depending on whatever criterion, emotional or rational or intuitive or whatever the heck I'm doing. That's my responsibility. And because I can't always see the effects of what I'm doing, although I try to account for them, it's much better to tailor my actions to what do I think is the morally best method of responding to this situation. And it gets more complicated because, yes, we are all alone in our own heads. None of you can know precisely what I'm thinking or why I'm giving such an off-the-cuff, terrible presentation, but we're alone together. We share this space. We share this human condition. And so, even though I can't completely connect to and relate with other people, I have to take them into account. And another of my favorite songs comes into play here, Redemption Song by Bob Marley. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? Because all I ever have is redemption songs. And to me, in that sort of vaguely metaphorical way that I'm finding explains a lot of these truths better than, or these attempts at finding the truth better than scientific constructs. To me, that means recognizing that not only are we all alone, not only are we all together alone, but in a sense, we're all in this together. We're all trying to figure this out, whether we come at it from a religious or scientific or philosophical bent or some sort of hybrid, or maybe whether you are doing maybe the thing that's the best thing to do and just living. We're all people with thoughts, feelings, and not because there's any external responsibility for me to do this, but because I am finding not peace necessarily, but serenity. Not comfort necessarily, in fact the opposite, but acceptance. And not happiness as it's understood in the conventional social sense, but ironic joy at the experience, the pain and pleasure both. That compels me to try and help other people find and honor their own meaning, their own meanings, their own purposes, and their own paths. Provided, of course, they aren't, Hitlers or Stalins or murderers or anything like that. Not because those things are wrong objectively, but because to me, the universe doesn't tell me this. I just think it's wrong to deprive other people of their ability to act. And so that's the extent of my objective morality and ethics to other people, is don't take away their autonomy and power and choice, but also help them try and find that in themselves if possible. So Redemption Song, Bob Marley, break the chains of the slavery if we possibly can. Then the final one, and perhaps the most important, is a verse from Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. I had one of those beautiful, transcendent, I guess you could call them existential moments a few weeks ago. I was talking with a friend on Facebook Messenger. There was this phenomenal, just thunderstorm outside, and we were both talking about, wow, how beautiful is this? Just because we say it is, right? There's no actual beauty in the universe. That's all what we find and make. but I was listening to Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah at the same time. And the thing that I guess ties my whole meaning together is, even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah. In other words, I try and make the best choices I can in a situation as dictated to me by my own subjective ethics, what I'll call my will to authenticity. I follow that inner commitment to myself and to other people as best I can. And it's not ever going to be good enough, right? There's no way it can. Because it's all just chaos and randomness, and I'm just this little person in the whole universe. I can't do anything about that. I'm going to fail, probably more than I succeed. But it's all in the trying. It's all in running the race. And even when I do fail, oftentimes I'll succeed in doing something else really cool in spite of myself. But more to the point, all I have and all I can do is put my energy, as Camus called it again, my freedom, my passion, and my revolt into those things that, to me, motivate me to do that. So, in a sense, it's a refutation of any kind of external God, whether it's science or an actual religious God. A lot of people will look out, most secular people will look around them at the world and say, well, look at, the night sky. Look at a freaking double helix. We are so small. We're so incredibly tiny and insignificant. And it's all because of evolution and the laws of physics, which we're only kind of figuring out, on the quantum scale, and then what's actually more fundamental than that, who knows, but probably something. All of that stuff just shows how tiny and insignificant we are. And so that can replace God for a lot of people. And if that's you, great. But if that's not you, you have to replace God with yourself. Thou art God, as a famous sci-fi novelist once put it. And so that is a hard, lonely, but also incredibly liberating and optimistically joyful road, because you have phenomenal power to shape your life. I want to say in the name of Jesus Christ, amen, but that doesn't.
How about we have 10 minutes for questions?
All right, let's open this up. Say who you are, by the way, because if you raise your hand, it'll be up there for a while.
So Kirt, this
yes.
is Jeff.
Jeff.
Tony. What type of things, books, philosophers have you studied in existentialism? Is there anything?
Okay, so existentialism, by the way, I didn't actually define what it means philosophically because I spent more time, being selfish and telling my own story. But existentialism, basically, at its broadest level, is just kind of this disorientation being thrown into the world and looking at all the ways people have found to try and make sense of it, science, religion, philosophy, whatever, and finding they don't quite measure up to your subjective human need to have it all make sense. So there's Soren Kierkegaard, a religious existentialist who I love. He popularized the leap of faith idea where, I can't really see in reality any belief in a God because it's all just so absurd and contradictory and weird. But my heart has this thing I can't explain that wants me to believe, and that's what matters. So, leap of faith. That's one kind of existentialism. There's also Friedrich Nietzsche, who is confusing and beautiful. Very easy to misread if you were a sociopath. But I really like him because I don't think I'm a complete sociopath, although I perhaps dabble on the spectrum. Albert Camus. I really like Camus. I don't always agree with his conclusions about he comes to a little more of a depressing place than I do. But if you're wanting to get into existentialism, Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus and The Stranger, and then later he wrote something called The Rebel. Those are probably the easiest, most accessible gateway drugs, I guess. Question?
I have a question, Kirt. This is your father.
I kind of figured. I mean, my senses might be fooling me. I can't prove that they aren't, but...
Thank you for allowing us to come, even though you didn't invite us and we had to sleuth our way over. I want to tell you I love you, and I totally agree with a whole ton of things that you said today. One thing, when you were debating or presenting the choices that we had as individuals, and I forget your exact verbiage, but one was, I can't remember what the first one was. The second was to replace yourself with God or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm my God.
Isn't there another option to accept a God?
Yeah, and if you want to go there, by all means. I can't do that in good faith.
But you should at least present it as an option to the
Well,
public, right?
I did. I mean, it's not my job, really, to proselytize for any ideologies I don't agree with. And so, yes, of course people know you can believe in a God. And yes, that's a choice you can make.
All right, I just wanted to state.
In my mind, it's probably the worst of them, but it's a choice you can make.
Thank you.
So, this is Elisa. I like actually what you said about that. Actually, I thought that was really helpful. As I've kind of, thought about a lot of the same things, but not as deeply, because I'm just frankly not as smart as you are. But my sort of end result was just that God was the best part of me and the best part of humanity. Because I think societally, if people are viewing God less as a sort of damning, fierce person or entity or whatever, but rather whatever is good in the world. So I kind of think it seems similar. I don't know if that...
It does, and something I didn't get to is the terms like best and good. We're all going to have a little bit different take on what that means. My dad and I obviously diverge a ton on this. Objectively, I don't think either of us are right, because all we can see is what we see and how we perceive what we see, right? We all have such different experiences. So best and good. I agree with you with the caveat. That's not something you find objective answers for outside of yourself. At least I can't. I'm not that smart. I don't see any in evolution or science or religion any coherent, consistent thing that says, well, this is the moral objective code you should behave by. So I like to say morality is intersubjective. In other words, yes, we all decide what's right and wrong for us, but guess what that's influenced by? The facticity, as it were. Evolution, for one, the biological drives we have, which are powerful, and I'm not denying them. Society, culture, and most people end up coming to a very similar subjective morality. If I were to pull out a gun and open fire here, which no, but most universally people would say that's wrong. And what existentialism, my particular brand that I have right now, is that's one of those areas where our own subjective moralities mostly line up, and thank goodness for that. But it's not because there's something best outside of us that we can align ourselves with. It's that there is something within us that says this is what I think is right and wrong. And a lot of times those are going to disagree, and that's why the world is interesting, really.
Hey, Kirt, I got a question.
Yeah.
It's Christian.
Cool.
You said something along the lines, maybe I misheard you, but you said something along the lines of feeling alone was in that theme, and the more you communicate with someone, the further you realize you're apart. And that didn't ring true to me because I feel like you can connect. Maybe you're never close, but you can get closer to each other. Where it sounded like you said you never get.
Okay,
get further.
so I probably should clarify that because it's kind of a complicated thing, and I'm not very good at explaining because most people don't see it quite like I do. Yes, we can get closer, but in my mind, the more we get closer, and getting closer is a good thing, right? We understand, we're communicating a little more effectively. We perhaps learn some things about other people that we wouldn't know. And we sort of create this society by trying to get closer to each other, and it's beautiful, it's awesome, I'm all about it. But for me, when I do that, it's almost a paradox. The only way I can do that is by realizing, partially because no one's been able to quite figure out the weird, chaotic clockwork of thoughts that's my brain. I can't know what you're thinking and what you're feeling and why you're deciding to do what you do. And the more I get closer to you, the more I realize that, yes, I can get closer, but I don't see a way to actually, actually completely connect and understand, make it so neither of us are alone, or not alone anymore. The metaphor I like to use is we have radios, and we can try and, boost our antennas and transmission power and ability to receive radio waves and all that stuff. We can get good at tuning into the right channels that are closer to where other people are. And you do that not just by talking, but by, doing things with other people. Service, or devoting yourself to a cause, or love and intimate relationships, or whatever. So yeah, you can get closer, but the more I get closer, the more I realize I can't actually completely connect, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Kirt, this is Steve. Just to follow up to that, it seems that in science, scientists, the more they know, and the more they discover what they don't know.
Yes.
And in that sense, getting closer to another human, you're approximating a closeness, but you realize how complex each human is, and therefore there's a gap that's not crossable. But coming back to your kind of main personal story, I for one am glad that you weren't successful in your attempts.
Most of the time I am now, too. I turn on the TV and watch presidential debates, and that makes me really reconsider every now and then.
We may survive.
You're not alone.
Sorry, carry on.
But I've had lots of great conversations with you, and I've kind of witnessed you finding a measure of purpose and a reason for being here. And I love how you described how all humans are doing their best to try to understand, and they use whatever they can to understand this existence, if it's religion, if it's science, or what have you. But I think the theme was we're all alone, but we're together in our aloneness. And in that, there's something that knits us together as humanity. And I just want to thank you for the role you're playing in my life in kind of having a better understanding for how all of us can operate independently, honoring one another for our independent approaches, and still having connection. Because I think in the connection with others, there's this great sense of belonging, and that in and of itself gives purpose.
You know, the paradox I find, and we've talked mental circles around this for hours and hours and hours and all this. Steve and I have had some phenomenal conversations. We came up with something like the brain-heart scale and ironic defeat and all these cool things to try and measure meaning in life and flawed models that are still fun to play with. But in my mind, the paradox is the more that I actually try and find compatible ways of meeting other people and the way I see it, you know, fine-tuning my transmission and receiving capacity, there's a part of me that feels more alienated because it makes me realize how separate we really are or seem to be. And I guess I'll respond to this with, I was doing random, just chaotic research for this talk yesterday. And I was really interested, something I'm wanting to explore now is if there's a bridge between existentialism and Buddhism. So I was looking that up yesterday, and there was an existentialist perspective and a Buddhist perspective, and the Zen Buddhists said, well, we're really not that much different, just existentialists are more depressed Buddhists. You know, yeah, we'll live in the moment, but the moment kind of sucks and we don't want it to suck. Where a Buddhist will say, you know, just accept what is. But there's a lot of similarities. And the existentialists said, Buddhism tends to come from a place where you seem connected to people. And then in order to gain the ability to be more like the human you want to be, you kind of have to detach and step back and say, well, a lot of these are illusions and social constructs, and you know, these emotions are not me, they're things that are being experienced and so forth. The existentialist comes from a place, at least me, and I know this is an artificial construct because of course we're all interdependent on each other, but in my mind, the interpreting part of me starts from a place of complete detachment, saying, I'm watching these things and I feel like a weird, you know, a freaking salmon trying to climb Mount Everest. I'm just so alien. What is this thing and why am I here and I'm not part of this. And that's sort of my authentic inner being as far as I can see it. And then finding ways to attach that. So it's kind of a mirror image of Buddhism that hopefully ends up in sort of similar-ish places, if that makes any sense.
I have a question. It's Elisa.
Okay, this would be our last question. We're out of time.
Sorry, I talk too much.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering on the day-to-day, what does it look like for you? Like, is the search or this internal or sort of struggle or slash learning process, is that in itself what brings joy or?
So that's actually what I'm trying to work on right now is like I said just a second ago, I'm so detached in a sense. Myself is so good at, and not necessarily analyzing things objectively the right way, but it's so good at making all these random observations about other people and about the things I'm feeling that sort of distance me, whatever the heck I am, from that. I'm trying to find ways to integrate that self with sort of the living, experiencing self. And it's hard because I just want to freaking think about all this stuff. When the answer, and I know this is the answer, is you've realized you have this tremendous freedom, go use it. And I'm gradually doing that more by doing things like waking up in the morning even though my body freaking hates me at 6 in the morning so I can go to the gym with my mom. Doing things like actually trying to put more emotional and time management energy into my schoolwork, and my relationship with people as a whole, but also those few people who, for whatever reason, have earned their way into my, I guess, in people who I'm most closely tuned with, I guess, and I'm getting the radio transmissions are still garbled, but they're a little more clear than they are from the other humans. So mindful meditation helps me. Every day I try and take at least 10 or 15 minutes to do the whole just notice and stop trying to direct your thoughts to a certain place thing. Exercise is helping me, school's helping me. But yeah, actually applying that freedom to my everyday choices is the challenge. And I'm marginally better than I was, but I'm still, nowhere near I hope to, but nowhere near the place I want to be with that. So I don't know if that's an answer, but it's a process.
Thanks.
And it's all about the process, by the way. I'm never going to be to where I want to do. I'm never going to integrate this all with the rest of my life because I'm such a disjointed, awkward human who talks too much and doesn't say anything worth saying. But, like I said earlier, it's all about the climb. It's all about that subjective, deontological, do the right things to try and get closer to that. And I'm marginally better than I was, so progress. Yeah. That's the thing.